So for this project, I decided to take Walt's advice and focus on different types of dance. The types of dance I decided to focus on were tap and ballet, because they're the two most differing types that I felt would have the most information uh, based on them. Because if I were to use something like hip hop, which emerged in the 1980s, due to the Ngram viewer cutting off in 2008, there wouldn't be a whole lot of information uh, for me to make a solid comparison about. So yeah, first thing I did was search ballet, dance, and tap, and then quickly realized I'd have to specify tap dance to make a more accurate comparison between the two. Um, I also then realized I would have to multiply the frequency of tap dance by 1000 to get any sort of information on the chart, besides a little orange line at the bottom. I also just multiply the frequency of ballet by 10 just for, comparison reasons. So we see ballet sort of make its first American debut around the mid 1750s. Not a huge surprise considering that was when the French and Indian War erupted. Obviously, you know, these French guys are bringing all their ballet culture and whatnot with them, so that's that. I decided to look up a history of ballet. It actually originated in Italy, but it was brought to France by Catherine de' Medici, married to King Henry II. And she sort of made ballet to what it was today with her elaborate festivals, including dance, decor, costume, etc., etc. And then you have this fly as hell mofo right here, King Louis XIV, actually taking part in ballets himself. And so obviously, both of these things just sort of giving ballet the sort of uh, known prestige that it has today. 1717, all right, yeah. 1776, uh, uh, France and America become allies, best friends. So you sort of see after that point this sort of steady increase here. Not a surprise because best friends, share everything and whatnot. So, jumping to tap, you sort of see this emergence right here in 1920. I did some research, found out that tap actually was a thing before this point. Just no one talked about it. And I decided to look into that and found some pretty cool info. So obviously, tap is a lot different than any sort of other kind of dance because it's not to the music. It sort of makes its own music, and it's this very abstract thing, and I don't think people really thought much of it or could really sort of describe what was happening um, during it. So they just, put it to the side a little bit. And there was also the fact that tap was largely created by a fusion of West African and Irish dancing. So obviously these two groups, not the most respected in early America, so not a huge surprise that wasn't mentioned because, why would people write about, the dances of the ones who they're persecuting against, pretty much. Not persecuting, but you know what I mean, whatever. So anyways, you also have historians saying here that they think that tap was also sort of nurtured in urban environments where a variety of ethnic groups lived, and they used distinctly urban rhythms and syncopations of the machines that they were around to sort of, create this very unique form of dance. So, not a huge surprise that it only makes its first appearance here in the 20s. Um, it's very blue collar, and I don't think a lot of people, really thought much of it, respected it, until the 20s when it sort of became uh, the thing that it is today. Because the tap shoes themselves sort of became modernized with the taps being nailed onto the shoe soles at the toes and heels. And then in 1921, you have Shuffle Along as well as entire different chorus lines, I'm assuming, emerging onto the scene. And as well as here, vaudeville, obviously a huge component of 1920s American culture. And you have this quote here that says, "There wasn't a show that didn't feature tap dancing. If you couldn't dance, you couldn't get a job." Obviously showing that, all of these things are coming together and, forcing tap sort of into, you know, American literature, because people are talking about it and they're going to it on Broadway, where the stars of it, were Fred Astaire and Bill Robinson, otherwise known as Bojangles, super fly guy right there. Um, let's see. Nightclubs also sort of making their first appearances, where tappers went and performed for people. And then 1927, you have The Jazz Singer, which is the first film sort of that has sound in it. And yeah, and they featured a lot of tap dancers, on film from that point on, and became more mainstream thing with Fred Astaire going into film, and then you have Shirley Temple and Gene Kelly, all of these huge names, Ruby Keeler, coming onto the scene and making themselves known. So going back over here, we see that ballet sort of has this sort of increase, drastic increase in the 30s. So I decided to take a look at that as well. Here we see that George Balanchine, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right, Russian dancer, super talented, came to America and collaborated with Lincoln Kirstein to create the School of American Ballet, January 1934. Obviously, this is an extremely prestigious school. Even today, it's widely talked about. And they also set up from that school the touring company of dancers called the American Ballet. Probably, everyone sort of recognizes that. And, performing with the Met and, really just getting ballet sort of to the masses almost in America, because they really are just focusing on making it, and not this, foreign thing. It's something that, can have roots in America as well as, Russia and France. And then we see here in a book about the 1940s called The 1940s. So yeah, super creative title there. We see that 1940s would prove to be important transitional years as concerns the directions of ballet. And so 1940, Richard Pleasant and Lucia Chase creating the Ballet Theater, which would later be renamed the American Ballet Theater. ABT is still going strong and, really just touring all over the country, even today. And you see here that they're, having, sold out shows all over the nation. Obviously, people are going to be writing reviews in newspapers, so really does sort of explain this, huge jump at that point. So, it's kind of funny how, 1940s we have, ABT being formed and this huge spike of ballet right here, while tap just goes on this like huge long dip. Obviously tap is, as we've talked about, more blue collar than ballet. So, World War II, starts in 1941. So you're gonna have people, men and women going, into the labor force, going off to war. And because tap is so blue collar, it's not a huge surprise that it dips. And then it continues to dip after the war, as people, are going to school and, you're really just focusing on families instead of, dance. And then, yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, so ballet is mostly focused on, sort of the prestige and wealthy, so it's not a huge surprise that it didn't really have a huge effect as the war was going on. Obviously, you have these super wealthy people probably not going off to war, so they're going to be spending their time seeing the ballet, talking about the ballet, and yeah. So then we have here in the 1950s sort of this decrease of ballet. I decided to look into this. Why did this happen? So here I found this article when I googled 1950s, and it's actually about the American film industry, but I thought the information was sort of could sort of be related to ballet, because it's sort of coinciding in that they're both sort of these huge shows that people get dressed up and go to see and spend their money on. So, this article was just sort of talking about how in the early 1950s, the film industry sort of started declining due to the prevalence of television. So that got me thinking, I'm sure that, as everyone sort of gets televisions, they're not going to really be wanting to go, spend all their money on, going to this huge event at, the ballet and whatnot. And they can just stay at home and, play on their newfangled TV. And then 1970s-ish, ballet sort of makes this dramatic spike. So when I researched that, I found that 1970s was actually when a lot of like ballet films and came out, such as Ballet for All in 1972, and the film American Ballet Theater, A Close-Up in Time. And then you have down here, if I can find it. Oh, the Landmark Dance in America series begins its first broadcast with all of these huge companies, including the Pennsylvania Ballet and the American Ballet Theater. So basically, television sort of made ballet accessible to more people because instead of, having it only be this thing that wealthy people can go to because they're the people who can afford tickets, they bring it to TV and people who can't afford tickets to go see it, can't afford to go to big cities to go see it. They can just turn on their television and watch it. And then around the same time, you see tap dance increasing. And so go back here and we see that. Silver surge began in the 1980s when successful Broadway shows such as 42nd Street and Black and Blue opened and prominently featured tap. These are two really, really huge shows and still touring today. And so obviously that's going to have a huge effect with, critics talking about it, just imagine sort of like Hamilton of, the 80s, I guess. And then 1984, you have Savion Glover, hugely famous tap dancer, coming onto the scene as a 10-year-old. And he sort of, remains pretty big in the scene until 1996. And then looking back here, you sort of see tap is still on this steady increase. And, based on, the information here saying that tap dance companies were forming and that, the style and innovation of these new artists were creating like this new generation at the dawn of the new century, it supports the fact that like tap is just coming back onto the scene and it's a sort of new way. And obviously I think you have a lot more companies and studios forming that are going to competitions, and little girls are doing tap dances on stage in front of their parents for recitals. So it makes sense why it sort of has this increase here. Consequently, you also have a huge decline in ballet, majorly due, and I'm assuming, to the emergence of MTV and hip hop dance. You see people sort of moving away from these very technical styles of dance that were prevalent earlier in the century. And that's another reason why I think tap dance is just becoming more and more frequent, because people don't like the technicalities of dance. They want to be free to move and express themselves how they want. I think that, you know, that ballet will always sort of remain prevalent, just because it really is more well known than tap. So, yeah, I'm done now. Thank you. Bye.